Morning, everyone. My name is Philip Young. This is the California Proprietarian Podcast. You are watching the inaugural episode, and I am on today with my guest, Arden Young. She actually happens to be my very own sister. And just to get into the background a little bit of what we're trying to do here. A proprietarian is somebody who defends and believes in and promotes private property rights. That would be me. Some would describe me as a right libertarian, but the term libertarian has become kind of loaded and polluted recently by some of its worst co-opters, so I've started to drift away from the use of the term. So on this show, we aim to promote and defend private property rights in any way we can, and that extends to the topic we'll be getting into today, which is defending the innocence of children. And to me and my philosophy, I've certainly come to believe that the primary private property of a child is their very own innocence. And today we have on somebody who is very much an expert in reporting on some of the most imminent threats in our culture and society today against the innocence of children. Arden Young, as I stated previously. So we'll be delving into some of the work that she's done in that regard and how it relates to the wider war for our culture in the midst of the cultural Marxist and neoliberal assault upon it. So with that, I'd like to turn it over briefly to Arden to give an introduction in her own words as she sees fit, her background and her work, and then we'll delve into how that interplays with the wider culture wars in which we all find ourselves.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Philip. I'm honored to be your first guest on your podcast.
Thank you so much.
So I'm Arden Young. I'm an investigative journalist, and I most recently went undercover to record various Pornhub employees admitting to illegal, illicit, and predatory practices behind the scenes, including but not limited to targeting children with their disgusting content.
Fantastic, and I know that you sort of did it in an expose documentary style. You wore a camera, so you collected. I guess in the espionage community, it would be referred to as humans or human intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So very well done, because you got them to be a lot more honest than anybody would normally be able to get them to be. I think under other more formal or more professional circumstances. So just if I may, I'm going to start delving into some of the revelations that they made to you, so some of the specifics. You were talking to one individual, and I'm sure you could fill me in as to his name and his position at MindGeek/ALO, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he was mentioning something about how him and some of the content creation team on Pornhub, or the moderation team, whatever, they would deliberately try to promote or make videos that involved putting, sort of, to put it euphemistically, to put niche topics, into the videos, such as transgender individuals being featured in these videos. And they did this, in his own words, for the purpose of normalizing it to young, often juvenile viewers who have little to no sexual experience, in order to cause them to become lifelong consumers or customers of that sort of niche content.
Yeah.
So if you could delve into some of what he had to say there and how you interpreted it.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the parent company of Pornhub is called ALO now. It used to be called MindGeek. It not only owns Pornhub, but it owns hundreds and hundreds of different types of pornography websites, and they do everything from write to produce to record to distribute and advertise the pornography. So it's all in-house, and they're a huge, huge company. So I recorded Dylan Rice, who is a senior script writer for many of the pornographic sites that ALO owns. And he primarily focuses on gay and trans content. And he said that they purposefully market LGBTQ pornographic content to historically straight viewers. And they very closely track a user, using cookies and things like that. So they're able to tell who you are, how old you are, the kind of things you're interested in and clicking on, and the kind of videos you gravitate toward. So they take that and they'll purposefully push, gay content, trans content in order to, quote, convert a viewer. His words, not mine. And I think in his view, it's all because they're trying to expand the marketability of a single person. So if someone's only interested in straight or vanilla content, as he puts it, they want to try to expand that to make one person interested in purchasing more types of content. So, at the very, very best, it's they're purely thinking about profits rather than the fact that they're manipulating someone's sexuality, or at least trying to.
Now, to your mind, and I don't know how much you were able to get into this or get a sense of this with him, but to your mind, did you get the sense that his motive was primarily or solely, for the profit or the capitalistic side of it, or did you get the sense that he was attempting to, promote these conversions, as you said he called them, for to like satisfy some kind of sexual fetish on his part?
So, I think, first of all, I think his understanding of why gay content was marketed towards straight people was purely for monetary reasons. However, his personal views that he divulged to me was that pornographic content, no matter if it was LGBTQ content or straight content, whatever, was actually beneficial for children to view educationally. So his personal views kind of, I think, suggest a more social, I don't know the word, there's like a social aspect to why he viewed marketing this way as a good thing.
Social engineering.
Essentially, yeah. I don't, he's not the person who makes those decisions. I have personal suspicions that way, way, way higher up in the company, there's, some social motivations involved.
Okay. So you think, is it your opinion, do you surmise that the people that really run ALO and MindGeek and Pornhub, do you think they subscribe to cultural Marxism? And for those of you real quick that aren't familiar, cultural Marxism, it's both an ideology and a method of operation, a modus operandi, whereby leftists will attempt to undermine traditional religion, traditional faith, and also the traditional family unit in order to pave the way to impose, some form of socialism, and that can vary, but it was pioneered by Antonio Gramsci because, after classical, original, organic Marxism failed to be imposed in Europe, he sat there and he theorized that if the church, the traditional faith, and the traditional family could be destroyed, then this would pave the way for a totalizing socialist state to take over, because there wouldn't be any competition for its allegiance. So do you think the people that run the operation at Pornhub, do you think that in a doctrinaire sense they subscribe to that?
I mean, it's evident that they just simply don't care about family. They don't care about protecting children, and they're going to do anything it takes at whatever cost to continue making their profits.
So they regard the notion of family and of faith, they regard them as, I guess you could say, anachronistic inconveniences.
Yeah, I mean, I think they take the public stance that, anyone has the right to do and worship however they want in private, but here at Pornhub is like a safe space for anyone to delve into whatever fantasies you'd like. This is your time. But these categories of pornography on Pornhub suggest that they don't care about family. In fact, it's so destructive to family. They have incest pornography
Yes.
on Pornhub as one of the constantly trending categories. And
Yeah.
they have the teen category, among many others I'm sure I'm not even aware of, that are just unthinkably horrible and destructive to any type of society.
Well, and it's also deeply disturbing how popular the step parent and stepchild
Yes.
genre is on Pornhub because they add the step part in so that it's not technically incest, but at the same time it's still potentially very dangerous and very harmful, and it plays into some of the most inappropriate and potentially most predatory sexual situations that any person could be in.
Yeah, and sorry to get graphic here, but
Hmm.
even, one of the employees actually explained this to me, how disturbing the step category was, is I think he was saying, like, when you have a pornographic video featuring, like, a step family, many times it's, like, a stepmom and a stepson, but it'll be, like, her biological daughter in it. So it's like
Oh.
a stepmom, her daughter, and then the stepson. So technically there is actual incest happening there. It's
Right.
just not often portrayed that way because it's two girls, if that makes sense.
Yes, and so I think it gets kind of downplayed or seen as less harmful or less deviant for that reason. Especially because to some guys that have more I guess off the beaten path fetishes, it plays into that fetish. So and then of course I think part of the reason it's so popular is because it's become so common, and then as it gets more common, it gets socially destigmatized, and then you have more people watching it, and
Yeah, it's just so disturbing. Like, way, way back when the internet was first becoming widely used, Carnegie Mellon actually did a study on internet pornography. And they looked at what kinds of pornographic files were being downloaded, and it found that the vast, vast majority of most downloaded files were of pornography way, way outside the norm. So I think it was like less than 10% of the downloads actually depicted straight vaginal sex. Sorry to get
no,
graphic,
no, 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 it's okay.
but when you take something like the internet, where when you're viewing pornography, it's a completely private experience. So you're no longer going to a video store and having
Mhm.
to check out the video and pay the cashier and be like all embarrassed.
Yes.
You're completely privatizing the entire experience, so you're way more free to view much more deviant things without embarrassment.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we often hear usually from the left these days that oh this or that behavior or this or that opinion or this or that view it needs to be destigmatized. But I think we've forgotten as a society that certain behaviors and certain desires are stigmatized for a reason.
Yes.
There's a very socially and morally sound reason for certainly first and foremost I think for stigmatizing incest, and also along that same vein for stigmatizing inappropriate relationships between adults and children.
Yeah.
And those are stigmas that we don't want to tear down. Now, we don't want to have a situation where somebody who say has homosexual inclinations feels so ashamed and feels so guilty and feels so terrible about themselves that they get depressed or they feel unduly ashamed. We don't want to stigmatize people with those feelings, but we certainly need to stigmatize behaviors that are obviously very very harmful, irrevocably harmful when carried out.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but pornography is so often used as a tool to groom a child by a predator. And we see that in so many situations, or even just like a family member of the child uses exposure to pornography to desensitize the child to sexual activity.
Well, and it makes perfect sense that that would be a tactic for grooming, because a child has little to no perspective on what appropriate and inappropriate situations look like. So therefore, they're kind of more of a blank slate. They're prone to suggestion. So if you start them off with that, then you're starting them off with a mentality that hey, maybe this is okay.
Well, yeah, and to add to that, Dylan Rice, the senior scriptwriter that I recorded, he also said that they will purposefully create the pornographic ads to depict someone who appears to be 15 having sex with someone much older than them, an adult.
Yeah.
And he said this serves a dual purpose. It appeals to both pedophiles and young teens because it's what pedophiles want to see.
Right.
But when you get a curious young teen, looking at pornography, they want to see someone who they can relate to in the pornography, which
Mhm.
is horrible. But Apparently, it's a tactic they use at Pornhub.
Well, and that's not surprising at all, and it's also not surprising that the same tactic would be extrapolated to the broader culture. I wanted to get a little bit into a documentary film that Arden and I both watched very recently. I think it only came out last year, I want to say. So this is a very recently released film. I've got a few notes. On that topic right here that I'd like to read off of. These attempts to, use this sort of remote grooming to normalize deviant and or harmful sexual behaviors for the purpose of generating some sort of perverse social or cultural revolution, they actually go back further than we might imagine. We might associate those tactics with the information age, with the internet, with social media, with pornographic sites like Pornhub, and obviously, they are strongly associated with those things. But this actually goes back to long before the internet was widely used or popularized. And one incarnation I think we see of that is an organization called CAPropCast. And for the purpose of accuracy, I want to make sure I get this right. I have the acronym pulled up here. CAPropCast stands for the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. It's a national nonprofit organization based in D.C., of course, where else? And ostensibly, they are dedicated to the promotion of healthy, comprehensive, beneficial sex education for minors to, prepare them to make healthy and safe sexual decisions. Which, when it's put that way, that doesn't sound like such a bad thing because nobody wants there to be, unwanted teen pregnancies or the unnecessary spread of STDs, especially among young people. Nobody wants that. But CAPropCast very much is an organization with an ideological social agenda. What they attempt to do these days, especially, is they attempt to do what this Dylan Rice individual does. I think even perhaps on a much larger scale, on an educational scale. They try to normalize, the depiction of homosexual activities and of transgenderism to minors, when they're still in those mentally and psychologically and sexually formative stages. And what's interesting is CAPropCast was actually funded in the 70s and 80s by mainstream sexuality magazines like Playboy and Penthouse at the time, which were the Pornhub of back then, because obviously there were no sites back then, so that was the closest thing you had. And people like Hugh Hefner and the people that ran Penthouse actually funded CAPropCast pretty extensively for the purpose of promoting sexual behaviors to a younger generation, the sort of sexual behaviors that would tend to undermine the family unit. One of which just being run-of-the-mill adultery. Not that adultery is okay or that it should be treated as run-of-the-mill, but they were trying to promote whatever sexual behaviors they could that fall outside what would be
like
healthy to family building.
About having an affair and things like that. Because that's a really common, category on, Pornhub and things like that now.
It is, and it's a common category it's a popular category on Pornhub, presumably because it's a common fantasy in real life, not condoning it, of course. But the point I'm making here is that Penthouse and Playboy and publications like that went out of their way to ensure that was promoted as much as possible. And I think what Pornhub is doing now with its increased reach and with the fact that it can be accessed for free is they're attempting to push the envelope further into transgender content and content that not only promotes sexual behaviors that undermine the family, but notions of gender itself.
Right.
That would tend to undermine the family.
So Dylan Rice said something else that was absolutely shocking to me. I would have never, ever guessed. But so he writes pornography for a website called Trans Angels. And Trans Angels is a paid website owned by Pornhub's parent company. And obviously it focuses on transgender content. Most of the transgender content on there is female presenting trans people, so it will be like a male who has transitioned to female making pornography. But he says the main market for that, their main subscribers, the bulk of them are actually historically straight males that they've tracked using cookies. And they are the main buyers for that content, which was shocking. But I think what hooks these straight males is it's these two actors, seemingly female. By the way, a lot of them are extremely convincing, especially from the waist up.
Mhm.
And it features two female presenting people. So it's comparable to watching lesbian content,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's how it hooks these straight guys, which I thought was something I've just never thought of before. We know that lesbian content is probably the number one most viewed type of pornography.
It's definitely up there, particularly for heterosexual males.
Yeah, but how they're hooking these heterosexual males is choosing trans actors who really do appear to be female, at least from the waist up, in, sexual situations together. So it's kind of mirroring lesbian content.
Well, and I can only presume, and this is just me surmising based on what I've observed in the culture. Obviously, this stuff wasn't common when I was coming up. I just turned 30, so I'm a little bit behind the curve on some of this stuff. But I imagine with these poor younger guys, like these younger Generation Z guys that are still in the maybe age 11 or 12 to age 20, 21, 22 range, for them who are still having their sexual psychology in the very formative stages, if they see this and they have no perspective to compare
Hmm.
it to, then it could start to subconsciously convince them that they like it, for lack of a better way to say it, when they might otherwise be given more to their natural aversion to it.
Right.
It might it goes to show you that at that age how malleable sexual psychology is, and
Yeah.
I think it's particularly pernicious and nefarious and evil to attempt to manipulate that, especially when they're that young. And then what's going to happen is if they get used to that. How are they going to have a relationship with a biological woman? A functional one that's going to be satisfying for both, and that's going to hopefully lead to building a strong, healthy family. How are they going to do that?
Exactly. And I think it was one of the founders of Pornhub was pulled into this like congressional hearing where he had to testify about some of the things going on internally there. It was a few years ago, but he actually said that, Pornhub has done great things for society. It's helped people explore sexual fantasies that they would have never otherwise explored. And I think that answers so many questions. They are genuinely aware of the fact that they are exposing people to things they would have never been exposed to before and making them interested in those things.
They're not exploring existing natural fantasies. That they're creating aberrant, deviant ones where there otherwise wouldn't have been any. And I'm not saying any kind of pornography is healthy, but you're taking it multiple steps further when you're actually
Right.
having a hand in creating fantasies that very likely wouldn't have naturally occurred in the minds of
Yeah,
your
yeah.
viewers.
And you're not creating any roadblocks whatsoever for a child to access this content.
And it's incredible to me because we wouldn't even consider revoking, ID laws that require ID to purchase alcohol or tobacco, or where applicable, in jurisdictions that allow it, legal marijuana. The age is 21 for that as well. In some cases, I think I've been carded to go see a rated R movie before.
Yeah, I think I
So
remember that happening.
yeah, so we can get carded to go see a rated R movie, but we don't have to submit any kind of government issued photo
No,
ID.
and back when you had to go to a video store to get an adult
Yeah,
video, they definitely were
they checked
carding
IDs.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they had to by law. So yeah, the idea that Pornhub somehow finds its position defensible, that they don't want any kind of ID verification, it really goes to show you where it is they're coming from.
Yeah, and suddenly, all of a sudden, when these ID laws are coming to effect, Pornhub's legal team turns into the hugest First Amendment advocates whatsoever.
Yes.
When it's like so ironic that, I legally recorded these undercover videos and released them, but they're trying to limit my free speech by sending me legal threats and getting them actually pulled off of social media that I post them on. So it's just so hypocritical.
Well, it is. It reminds me too. I watch a lot of so-called pred busting content. It's one of my favorite types of content to watch,
Yes.
and it is very routine for internet predators who try to lure or entice a minor. For the purpose of engaging in lewd and lascivious conduct with that minor, if that predator also in the chats, in the online chats through the app or whatever, or through text, sends explicit sexual photos to the minor, either of themselves or someone else, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They will likely additionally be charged with, depending on the jurisdiction, it's usually called something like dissemination of harmful or obscene material to a minor,
Yes.
contributing to the delinquency of a minor, something like that. So they will be charged additionally, often with extra felonies, for sending that sort of content. So the idea that Pornhub would suffer no legal repercussions, or that they would incur no legal restrictions or regulation whatsoever for making content that's often even more graphic than a lot of what these preds are sending, readily available, to a large pool of minors, it's beyond me. And it seemed I used to say until very recently that the left is perfectly fine with ID requirements, except when it comes to voting. Well, I think we found something else, where in which they don't feel that ID should be required, and
Yeah.
that's access to pornography. So it's funny that they don't want ID required in a situation where requiring ID might threaten their hold on electoral office, power through electoral office, and they also don't want ID required where it might threaten the ability to pervert the minds of the most vulnerable members of our population. So
Yeah, and Pornhub has admitted that ID requirement to access their content is an 80% deterrent. So it actually deters like 80% of their audience. So you know why they don't want these ID requirements? It's because they lose 80% of their daily users.
yeah, they can complain all they want, and my answer, and I think the answer of most sensible people to that complaint on their part is too bad,
Exactly. And,
really.
and why is ID requirement such a deterrent? Well, I think there's a level of shame
Yes,
involved. It makes you second guess what you're about to do, right?
it does. And to be perfectly clear, and I think especially the guys out there can understand this. Virtually all guys of any orientation have on some somewhat deliberately accessed pornography at some point in their lives. So when we say there should be shame and
And
stigma around that,
girls. Yeah.
increasingly women too. So when we say there should be shame and stigma around that, we're not saying you should beat yourself to death with a club if you've ever done that
Of course not.
in your life. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is that society shouldn't go out of its way to endorse the behavior and to
Right.
promote it as healthy when it's not.
Yes, and it is being promoted as healthy, which is crazy. It's
Yes.
actually being promoted as a positive, healthy thing that if you don't have a partner, or even if you do and you decide to do this together, or what's your partner to say about what you do in your alone time? That's abuse, that's jealousy if they're trying to control what you do in your alone time by viewing pornography, which is just sad because I know so many people whose marriages have been torn apart by
Yeah.
pornography use.
Hmm.
And it's even gone both ways. Obviously, it's usually the man, but it even affects the women too, pornography addiction. So,
Well, especially because I think that increasingly these days there's probably more and more categories of pornography that are specifically engineered to appeal to the female mind a
yeah, I
little bit more.
imagine it's
I would
evolved.
imagine there is. I don't think I've encountered anything like that, but I've read that there is, and so it doesn't surprise me that a much smaller than men, but it was still increasing number of women are getting into this. And
Yeah.
and I can't imagine, given the effect it's had on men, I can't imagine it's good for women either.
Yeah, and I just think like pornography and the lifestyle of someone who like engages in pornography has been increasingly glamorized.
Right.
Um, and we have OnlyFans where it's like you're your own boss babe if you make millions of dollars having your own OnlyFans
Yes.
and things like that. So I think women have become more inclined to be a little friendlier toward the idea of either participating or viewing pornography.
Well,
over the
and
years.
this idea, but before we have to sign off here, I always found it very strange to say that for women promiscuity is empowering. You can make an argument that it might be enjoyable, and I'm sure for some it might be, but there's a difference between something being enjoyable versus it being empowering.
Oh, of
And I
course.
think
Yeah.
we also need to separate those two, and not everything enjoyable is healthy or empowering. But thank you all so much for being on with us. This is the inaugural episode of the California Proprietarian, and Lord willing, we will see you all again soon. God bless, and sic semper tyrannis.
What he said.